Hey everybody, it's Dab Girl Dab, and I wanted to share with you that, it's early September, and yes, football has started. I've got the game on record right now, but it's harvest season, and you can look at my apple tree behind me, which we'll look at a little closer, and you can see that she is loaded down with apples, which means that I have an apple crush coming up on the 18th, where I rent equipment to grind apples and then crush them and make my own cider. And I chuck that into the freezer and brew a little bit of hooch and apple cider vinegar with it. I also make dried apples and applesauce. And then I also, years ago, I did this and I really liked it, is to take some apples and to slice them into like quarters and put them in freezer bags. And that's really nice as well. Once you freeze fruit, it's better for juicing or using for things like adding to your oatmeal, for example. Or maybe like slicing up on top of your ice cream. So as of right now, my apples are about baseball sized, and I generally harvest when they get closer to softball size. And these are just looking so pretty. I'm very happy with this year's crop. They just look amazing. I've gotten a lot of this right between pruning and treating and stuff. And then I've learned over the years to best to put out my apple catcher early, and then I take these apples and put them in the fridge. Years ago, when I was a general contractor, my customer was sold their properties and were moving, and they said, "Deb, do you want to buy a refrigerator?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll put one in the garage." They're like, $25, and this has been a godsend. So I have this box is full of apples. This box is full of apples, and these are juicing apples. And then I've got another bag back behind here, which is full of some pretty apples. And so this one's a little bit small. It'll go into juicing. And juicing apples have some flaws and blemishes on them, which will get cut out before they get crushed. And so, the thing about it is that it's kind of nice to have a place that you can put them. I could always put them someplace else, like in the house, even where it's cooler, or in the, garage, or if you have attic space. Not attic space, but basement space is good. Now, one of the things I've been doing is trying to clean out the garage, and I am reusing. These are some old hay nets from my horse days, and we're going to show you how I use this for harvesting some hay. So it's been about 15 of the 24 years that I've lived on this property that I have not run a lawnmower. And in those 15 years, what I decided to do was have a messy yard, to leave it messy until next spring, and to utilize as much vertical space as possible in the garden. And so this is a former lawn area. And what I did is I left the grass in. I did cut it really short. I didn't use any kind of herbicide on it because I am organic. But what I did is I seeded it with white and crimson clovers and alfalfa. And as you can see here, they are all bloomed out. There's really a lot of seed heads left, but there's not a lot of flower remaining. This is a alfalfa that dried up in the summer, and I added some water to it, and so now it's perked up and it's running, and you can see how it's running out horizontally. And this is my potato garden here, which is in front of my honeybees. And I like to put a little bit of alfalfa in here because alfalfa is deep rooted, but they tend to give off a lot of nitrogen, and that's really good because potatoes love nitrogen. And so these guys are still flowering, and if you're into beekeeping, you know that a very small short flower that's purple is something that honeybees love. So because these are still in flower, I'm going to leave them right now. But I did have some, and this one here is younger, it's in flower. But I did have some of this pasture that was really tall. And today, what I did was come through and, for example, over the years, I've had alfalfa here, and this was about this tall, so I was walking around it. And then I had this alfalfa here, which was way tall. And you can see that what happened was is it flowered, and now it's into the seed formation stage. Well, if you've ever bought alfalfa seed, it's very expensive, like $30-40 a pound. And so what I did today is I took my clippers here and I just cut off sections. It's almost like shearing a sheep. Because I sat down on my little bench here and went through and just sheared off all those big branches because they're going to run against the ground. And so if you use a weed eater or something, you're not going to be able to get these. In fact, your weed eater won't cut these. But what I did is I cut across the ground, and then I took it and just rolled it back like you would do when you're sheep shearing. I did that with some big bundles. And when I talk about big bundles, I want you to see like what alfalfa naturally does. So here's another area, and that's my greenhouse over here. And then this is a chicken run. And then this is the fence line. And so I like to plant on this side of the fence line and let the plants come up through the fence. And then the chickens or turkeys can come along here and they can graze. You can see here I've got some nice alfalfa seeds that are developing. They're not dry yet and ready to fall out of the pods, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. But look at this stuff. I mean, this is a 3-foot fence, and it's got easily, another 3 feet of growth. I'm 6 feet tall, and that's easily as tall as me. So alfalfa gets really tall. Now, if you're a horse person, you're going to buy your hay depending on the cutting. And so when alfalfa starts off, the farmer will come in and they'll do your first cutting. And as you can see, that's a lot of finer leaves and such. This is very high protein. In fact, it's too hot with protein for horses. And so that usually goes to the cattle industry, and it's often added to silage pits or silage bags on the side of the road. And we've all seen those big, giant white plastic tubes that look like a big, long turd. Well, what they do is that they put either, corn or alfalfa or any kind of crop that they're growing as a silage. And they go in with a harvester and they chop it up into pieces that are about 3 to 4 inches long. And kind of like you would, if I went and process that yard with a weed whacker, you might end up with. And then it's all collected up and shoved in a plastic bag, and the sugars will ferment. Well, we all know that fermented foods are much better for you. They're easier to digest. And if you're a multi-ruminant type of animal like a goat or a cow, you're going to love this because it'll sit in your gut and fester, and it'll colonize your gut, and it'll move from one stomach pouch, your crop, and then down to your other 6 stomach pouches as you sit there and continue to chew your cud and add your saliva to it and break it down further. Horses can't do that. They have a much simpler stomach, and so a horse can't handle that hot alfalfa. And so for horses, you'll end up with a second cutting, which would be this segment, a third cutting, maybe a fourth. And when you get down to the fourth, you're dealing with the bigger stems. And these stems can be, very pokey. They do contain a lot of good nutrients in them, but they're coarse, and a horse has a harder time grinding those up. And so when you get past like your fourth cutting in alfalfa, horses are not much interested in it, and it's probably not good for them. You can cause dental problems by feeding some of those coarser feeds. And so those two can go to silage, or it can be used for quote unquote a livestock feed used on steers, for example. But you can see here how tall that plant is. And my chickens just love to cruise by here and graze every day. And they get nice fresh greens this way. But because it's harvest season, what's going to happen is the weather's going to turn, it's going to get cold, things are going to start to mildew and go bad. And why not utilize it? So I'm doing a couple things today. Is I'm going to harvest some of this beautiful alfalfa seed, which is highly valuable. And I want to reseed some pastures, which really just involves like cutting off a chunk with this and casting it into a place where I want there to be some alfalfa and just let it release on its own. The part of the stem that you throw out in your pasture will end up helping to feed nutrients into your soils and to that new plant. But I'll be able to add more alfalfa to my chicken runs. Now, pretty soon I will have to come in here and clean up this big borage mess. But as you can see, borage is an exceptionally good food source for your honeybees. And once again, you have these beautiful short purple flowers. And why is purple so important to your honeybees? Because they see in a UV spectrum more so than what we see, which is more of a white light spectrum. And so purple is closer to those blues, and they're drawn to them. Okay, so all this borage will get processed the same as that pasture here shortly, but I'm waiting for a hard freeze first so that these plants, which are an annual, will die back. And when they die back, then I will process them too. And here's another example of a bit of alfalfa in here with the flowers that adds some nutrients to them. So basically, I sat on my crate and I went and just cut a patch about 2 foot by 1 foot, rolled it over, scooted over, cut it, rolled it over, and then I gathered it all up. Now, normally I like to have a little hedgerow across the edges of the walkway here so that the chickens have some feed. The other thing I really like to do is this is lemon balm. And if you leave this in your garden, and this is where the like be messy part comes in, you'll find these beautiful little olive yellow chickadees that come through every single winter, every day, and will munch on these all winter. And so I will leave this hedgerow messy until next spring. And while this doesn't look pretty right now, it will build back really quickly. In fact, what I'll do is I'll get my little push mower out here, I'll weed whack it and knock all this down and even it out. And then that'll get raked up, and then I'll come through with my little push mower. And yes, it's the old-fashioned 1960s version of a little push mower with a little catchment on it, but it works really good for chicken feed. Okay, so let's put everything together and see what we did. We've got hay nets and cutting alfalfa with clover, and there's some grass at the bottom, and I just sheared that off at the base. So then I've taken it and bundled it into my hay net, and this is a lovely medley of alfalfa and clover, and there's probably some trapped insects in here. And there's seeds, because all these seed heads. And this is excellent feed for your hens all winter, which is going to give them an opportunity to get some nice fresh greens that'll be dried. We'll just hang this in the chicken coop. If I need to, I can reach in and grab a handful and throw it out. These longer bits of stalk, which are very coarse, not good for horses, will build up my litter base and add to my straw so that over the winter their base will fill up, and that will give them more insulation, and then all the chicken poo will rain down through the floor. And so if you're a chicken, like during the middle of winter, wouldn't you just love to eat some of this nicely dried silage, basically. It's kind of like making hay in the sunshine. And so the girls can still walk along here and munch on things, and I can still use my clippers and clip and toss in when I need fresh to them. I've also given them some on the ground, and they are getting all of the worst and ugliest apples right now, which they will come through and totally devour. And then, of course, there are some other things that are going to be harvested pretty soon. Well, here's the other thing that I'm going to harvest. So tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday, I will be coming out here and trimming my grapes and cutting the foliage back, which of course the chickens can munch on, and that too could be put into these leaves. Could be put into a hay net and dried, and I'll tell you what, these leaves are really good for your birds. Grape leaves, very, very good. But what I do this time of year is I tend to really cut back the grape while I go in and harvest, because I'm kind of doing two things at once. So I'll go in and cut back the plants and prepare them for winter. All the foliage will drop into the chicken coop so that the chickens can come and munch on it, and then the grapes will go into the garage for the crush that's upcoming, and the juice from that will end up in the freezer. And then just really last today, what I did is I took off my screen tops for the bees. I added a bucket inside. So essentially right here we have this is the top, and right here I've got a 1 gallon bucket with some sea salt in it, the pink sea salt, and then I poured some sugar into the back onto the top of this board. And so this is going to give them the opportunity to go, while it's warm, to process that sugar and move it down into the hive, or to live off of it right now and to save their honey stores. The salt water will help them to dry the nectar that they're bringing in. And by eliminating the screen, I'm going to let them accumulate a little more heat right now and get them more closed in and prepared for winter. I also took the big umbrella off so that they can get full sun and warm up, which will, of course, help them to, run longer this season. Both these hives are still looking very robust this year, and we'll see if they get through winter. I'm doubtful, but we'll see. And then the last thing I did is I did take some of this alfalfa that I want seed from, and I have put them in this tub, and this will eventually get put into another hay net, but for right now I want to let them dry. And as they dry, I'll continue to pick this up and give it a good shake. And all those little tiny seeds, they almost look like poppy seeds because they're so tiny. Those little tiny seeds will drop down in the bottom of the bin, and I'll be able to use those to replenish my seed supply. And then once I've collected some seed here in a couple weeks, and this is dried out nicely, I'll put it into this other hay net, and then by then a lot of this will have developed and finalized. I can come out and do a last clipping of this and some of that material over there, and I can fill up another hay net. But I think this is a really great way to spend 30 minutes in a small patch of your yard. And for the 2 chickens that I have right now this year, they'll eat on that for a good 3 months all winter. And if you're a chicken, you're going to be delighted to have that. So while it's about 85 degrees out, it's time to make hay in the sunshine, as they say. Now what I could have done is cut all those bits and left it in rows into the sunshine, and then flipped it over with a rake, and that's what a farmer would do. But the downside of that is that that's always in contact with the ground, so you're pulling moisture out of the ground into your drying product, and you have to rotate it often so that it will dry and not mildew. And so my thinking that by putting it in the hay net is that it has open air space on all sides. It's easy to rotate in that sunny spot and dry quickly, and it's less maintenance. So what are you doing to provide some roughage and some extra, nutrient dense materials for your chickens all year? Because if you feed them a nice medley like this, number one, we've fed bees all summer. Number two, nice tall plants don't take as much water. These have very deep roots, and so they're a little more resistant to drought. And then this time of year, you cut it all down, you got a lovely section of greens that you can offer your girls, and all of that goes into the eggs that you eat. And I don't have to go and buy alfalfa seed. And in a few weeks, I'll take my clippers, come out here, and cut back this borage, which means it'll remove most of that seed head, and I'll put that in another bale out there, another hay net, and that will be another source of feed for the chickens. What do you think, Eddie? Pretty cool? Huh? Can you smile? So, there you go. Make some hay in the sunshine. I mean, really, it was easy. Took me 20-30 minutes. Wasn't too strenuous. And I ended up with a beautiful big bale of feed for my chickens. So, what are you guys doing for your birds? How do you think that harvest season can help to enhance your dietary needs? Because for me, adding all these natural nutrients to my food stream that comes into my kitchen helps with my overall health. All right, I'm Dye Grill Deb. Love you guys. Bye-bye.